Welcome to How to Create an Excel Spreadsheet, presented by the Goodwill Career Pathways Institute. So now let's talk a little bit about what Excel is actually used for. It's used for data computations. So whenever I'm talking about data management, what I mean there is, for instance, let's say you're creating a budget spreadsheet. Excel is used for things such as budget spreadsheets. It's also used for things such as information management. So if you are collecting things such as inventory, if you are creating a list of clients perhaps, then that's something that Excel might be used for. You can create things like calendars in Excel and so many more things. When Excel was originally created, I think initially the idea was to be able to create a software program mostly used for mathematics. And then people saw that it was so useful for a number of other things. So they started to use it for a variety of other types of tools. And so you saw people starting to use it for things like their time cards, being able to clock in and out using Excel. So there were a lot of other tools that it started to be used for instead of places perhaps purchasing other types of software. So essentially, that is what we're using Excel for. Where is Excel located? When you go to the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, there's something called a Start menu. Your Start menu, depending on your operating system, could look like a small window, and that's for Windows 10 or above. And if you're using Windows 7, it's actually going to have the word Start. So on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, on your desktop, you'll actually see that window if it's Windows 10 or above. So on that window, you'll click it with the left side of your mouse, and then you'll have this whole page window that opens. It's alphabetical. So if you are using Windows 10, you're going to be looking for E for Excel. If you're using Windows 7, then you're looking for M for Microsoft, and it'll be under Microsoft Excel. You'll left click on that with your mouse, and it will take you to the screen by which to get to a new spreadsheet. Blank worksheets. So before you can really start to build a worksheet and then ultimately a workbook, you really need to understand the language of Excel. So each small square or rectangle, whatever you want to call it, is called a cell. That's a block of space by which you're entering content. Then up and down, those are your columns. I like to think of those as like Greek columns, and that helps me. It's always helped me to think of things in terms of architecture for some reason. So the columns are up and down, and then your rows are horizontal. Think about those like laying brick. And then if you double click in a cell with the left side of your mouse, you are doing what's called activating the cell. You're making it an active cell. When a cell is active, that means you can click and drag things, and you can start to add things like formulas. And so that's not always the best way to maneuver around in Excel. If you look at your keyboard, your up and down arrow keys are really the best way to maneuver around in Excel through your cells. You can also use your tab key to move around in Excel. And what that does is it helps to keep your cells from becoming active using the mouse. Then at the top above where you see A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you'll actually see a long bar. That's called your formula bar. So anything that ends up in a cell is actually being typed in your formula bar. So if you were to create a paragraph of information, where you're really typing that information is in your formula bar. So if you needed to make a change to a long piece of information, the best place to do that is in the formula bar at the top. Like with all Microsoft programs, there's a ribbon at the top. So the ribbon has on top of it your quick access toolbar, which has your autosave component at the top. If you're logged into Microsoft, you can autosave. If not, you'll need to press that piece of toast, as I like to call it, which is your save button. And it looks like a floppy disk for those of you who know what that is. Next to that, you'll have your left arrow, which is your undo button. I use undo in Excel probably more than any other program. So the undo button, which is that swipe left, redo is swipe right. So underneath that, you'll have all of your tabs: File, Home, Insert, Page Layout, Formulas, Data, Review, View, Help, and Acrobat. The ones you'll use the most often will be Home, Insert, Page Layout, and Review. So when you go under the Home tab, you'll see that there are block sections. And the ones that we'll talk most about today are going to be the Font section and then the Alignment section. And so when you look in Font, you'll see Calibri, which is a font style. You'll see a number 11, which is a font size. And then under that you have your BIU. B is for bold, I is for italic, U is for underline. Then the A with the red line under it with the little arrow beside it, that changes the color of your font. Then if we go over to the alignment section, you'll see where it looks like there are a bunch of lines kind of stacked on top of each other. That is your left align, center align, right align. Right now we're bottom aligned, there's mid align, and then there's top align. And so those are all in the alignment section there. And then to the far right of the alignment section, you'll see wrap text, which will be very important here shortly, and then merge and center. Both of those are things I use in almost every spreadsheet that I ever create. Creating a spreadsheet. What you'll see here with all my 80s new wave artists is that I've created a spreadsheet with a bunch of people's names. Notice I have the first names in column A and the second name or the last names in column B. If I were to say put the name Robert in cell A2, that means column A, row 2. So you'll see Robert is in cell A2. In cell D2, it says needs a receipt. Notice that it also has started to bleed over into cell E2. So we'll talk about that here in a moment. You can add content to individual cells, otherwise it's not going to sort correctly. So if I put David Bowie in cell A1, then if I wanted to sort by last name, I couldn't do that because it would just automatically be in D's because it's all David, right? So that's why it's important that I put first names in column 1, column A, and then last names in column B, or however, whichever columns that you're choosing to use for the creation of your spreadsheet. So enter the information you want first, then you can do things like go back and make style choices. So if I wanted to change the font that I'm using, I could go back to cell A1 and then click on David and then go up to Calibri, click the arrow, and then I could choose Times New Roman font if I wanted to change that. But first, I'm of course going to enter all the information that I want before I make those style choices because it can get really messy and then you're also going back and just making those style choices to one cell at a time, and that's very time consuming. With this, if you wanted to make a style choice, you could highlight the entire spreadsheet and then make that style choice, such as a font style, a font size, or a font color. Making style changes. So notice I have made a few style changes here. I've added some additional information. So wrapping text. At the top right-hand side of that alignment section, you'll see where it says wrap text. So in cell A3, B3, C3, and D3, you'll notice that Robert Smith now is a wider cell. Well, why? It's because I wrapped the text by clicking on and activating cell D3 with the left side of my mouse. Then I clicked on the button that says Wrap Text. And what that does is it takes all of the text that's available in that cell and it wraps it around so you can see the whole thing. I use wrap text in almost every spreadsheet, and it's because there's always information that needs to be visible. Otherwise, let's say I were to type something in cell E3, it would go right over the top of needs a receipt. And so as somebody who's looking at a spreadsheet for the first time, I may not have a clue what's underneath that until I have wrapped the text. Then if you look at the top in cell A1, Celebrity Fundraiser, what I've done there is I've made some style choices. I changed the font to Broadway, changed the color to blue, changed the size to 12 point. I didn't just do that. What I also did was I selected cell A1, B1, C1, D1, highlighted them all with the left side of my mouse, and then I clicked what's called Merge and Center. What it does then is it takes all of those cells, removes all the lines from those 4 cells that it had already selected, and it makes it one giant cell. So it knows not to sort data outside of that single cell, and so it looks a lot cleaner. You can center it if you want to. It looks very nice. All right, so then you can do things such as auto sum next. So I know that this is a celebrity fundraiser. I've got all the data that I need to have in order to calculate a total. I've added the word total for my spreadsheet here underneath Debbie Harry, lead singer of Blondie. Some of you knew that? Okay, great. All right, so we go down to cell B7, and then it says total. Well, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on cell C2, and I'm going to hold down the left side of my mouse and drag it all the way down to C7. C7 would have been blank whenever I was originally dragging down. Now on the right-hand side of your ribbon, there is a backwards looking E. It's a Greek style Z, or a Greek style E. And so what you'll do is you'll actually click on that, and that's called auto sum. And what that does is it calculates and inserts the formula for you into that bottom cell. So you'll actually see what the cell total will end up being. And if you were to click over the top of the 384.72 and then look in your formula bar, you would see the actual formula that was there, which is pretty cool. The next thing is notice in the sheet before, there was no line available to put celebrity fundraisers, so I had to actually add that. So to do that, what you'll do, if you need to add a row or a column, you'll go above or beside the actual area in which you want to add your row or column. Then you'll right-click with your mouse, a window will open, and then you will click Insert. It will automatically insert the row or column depending on where you're adding that, but it does have to be on the number 1 through whatever number you're clicking, or if you're adding a column, it has to be on one of the letters. So Excel is a little bit quirky with some things, and one of which is that many spreadsheets will need to actually be printed in landscape. So the best way for me to explain landscape for you is that landscape is from side to side and portrait is up and down. So a lot of things like calendars are in landscape. A normal memo is going to be in portrait. Portrait is your default, but most things in an Excel spreadsheet oftentimes will need to be in landscape because the information is wider. That's one of the reasons why people choose to use Excel as opposed to Microsoft Word for the creation of some of these documents. To set that up, what you're going to need to do is click on, in your ribbon, the Page Layout tab. Then you're going to click Landscape, and the document will then print correctly. You may also need to sometimes set a print area because, as you can imagine, with these things having infinite number of rows and columns, you may not need to kill so many trees in order to get the information printed that you need. So you may just need to print a certain section of a page. So what you'll do is you'll actually highlight that section with the left side of your mouse. So click that section. Then you'll go under the Page Layout tab. You'll see an option that says Print Area. Click the down arrow, and then it'll say Set Print Area. Once you do that, you'll be able to print just that selected area and get the information you need. There is a difference between a sheet and a workbook. A sheet is a part of a workbook. You can actually add more sheets by pressing the plus sign at the bottom of your workbook. So what you can do is if you press that plus sign, it will add as many sheets within your workbook as you need to add. Then if you needed to rename the sheets, what you would do is right-click where it says Sheet 1. And let's say this is a workbook for the entire year, and you're doing a budgeting workbook for the entire year. So that means you would need January, February, March, April, etc. So what you would do is after you're hitting your plus sign for each one of these things, you could right-click on where it says, it'll say Sheet 1, Sheet 2, Sheet 3. So right-click on that, and then you can type over the information that's there by typing in the name of whatever you're wanting to rename your workbook for. So that gives you that option. You can also do things like change the colors of the information in the bottom. So wherever it says like January, if you wanted January to be blue, February to be red, you could change that so that your tabs are different colors, and it gives you that option within the window. Final thoughts. Excel is used for so many things, many of which have absolutely nothing to do with formulas. But I do recognize that this is an introduction to Excel. So this was more about teaching you the language of Excel, some information about the workbooks and the worksheets themselves. But if you are looking for more advanced information on Excel formulas or Excel workbooks or worksheets, we do have a companion site that's available for you on GCF Learn Free. When you're there, on the top right-hand side, there's an option for topics. When you're there, you can actually locate Excel based on whichever Excel version that you have. So, happy hunting and enjoy using Excel.